The rain came down in thin, needling streams against the tall windows of Dr. Adrian Kessler's estate, a house far too large for a man who lived alone. Once, its halls echoed with laughter, his wife Claire humming as she cooked, his son Ethan's sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, his daughter Lily's delighted shrieks as she played with the family dog. But since the crash, silence had become a second skin, and the house a mausoleum of memories. Tonight, however, the silence was broken by the rhythmic hum of machinery deep in the basement. Adrian wiped sweat from his brow as he leaned over the operating table, staring at the 3 translucent pods lined against the wall. Inside each, a form floated. His family, or rather, the perfect replicas he had created from fragments of tissue salvaged from the wreckage. The air smelled of antiseptic and burnt wires. His hands trembled, not from fear, but anticipation. "I'll bring you back," he whispered, voice cracking. "I promised I'd never leave you, and I never will." Years of research in genetic manipulation had brought him here. He had been dismissed from his university post when his obsession with cloning crossed ethical lines. "You're playing God, Adrian," his colleagues warned. But grief had deafened him to morality. When the government grounded him, he took his research private, pouring his fortune into creating the lab hidden beneath his home. The world called him a disgraced scientist. He saw himself as a savior. The pods pulsed with faint blue light, veins of electricity running through cables like arteries. Monitors beeped in uneven patterns. Adrian checked Lily's spot first, brushing his fingertips over the glass. Her tiny face, so still, so perfect, looked like she was sleeping. "Daddy's her," he whispered, fighting tears. He turned to his wife's spot next. Claire's features, serene yet ghostly, stirred something between longing and dread. "You'll wake up soon. All of you will." He pressed a sequence on the console, and the room vibrated with mechanical life. Tubes hissed, pumping synthetic amniotic fluid into the pods. The bodies twitched, first small spasms, then stronger jerks. Adrian's heart pounded against his ribs. "It's working," he muttered, eyes darting between the readouts. The impossible was happening. He was about to undo death itself. A sound broke through the mechanical chorus. A groan, faint but unmistakable. Adrian froze, staring at Ethan's pod. The boy's lips parted, bubbles rising in the fluid. Adrian's knees weakened. "Ethan?" His voice cracked as he pressed his hands to the glass. The boy's eyes flickered beneath closed lids, then snapped open. They were pale, milky white, pupils searching yet unseeing. The monitor screamed with erratic spikes. For the first time in years, the silence of the house was shattered not by machines, but by the stirring of voices. Yet as the groans deepened into low, guttural noises, Adrian's exhilaration faltered. The air thickened with unease and a chill ran down his spine. His family was back. But something in those sounds told him they had not returned as they once were. The basement smelled of wet metal and something acrid, like burned hair. Adrian's pulse quickened as the pods hissed open one by one, fluid spilling across the tiled floor in a shimmering pool. He rushed forward with a towel, frantic to cradle his children, his wife, anything that resembled the life he'd lost. Claire collapsed first, coughing up a stream of synthetic fluid, her hair plastered to her face. "Claire!" Adrian cried, lifting her trembling body into his arms. Her skin was cold, clammy, but alive. Alive. Ethan stumbled out next, legs wobbling like a newborn colt. His pale eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting to the dim light. "Dad?" His voice was hoarse, guttural, but it was his son's voice nonetheless. Adrian's chest tightened, tears blurring his vision. "Yes, Ethan. Yes, it's me. You're safe now." The boy's gaze wandered, unfocused, then locked on Adrian with a hunger that made the scientist uneasy. Little Lily was the last. She sat upright in the pod before climbing down, her tiny hand reaching toward Adrian's. "Daddy?" The single word broke him. He gathered her up, pressing his face into her damp hair. "I told you I'd never leave you." For a moment, he forgot the years of grief, the accusations of madness, the loneliness. They were here. His family was here. But the illusion cracked almost immediately. Claire's cough didn't subside. It deepened into ragged hacking, each spasm shaking her frame. "Water," she rasped. Though when Adrian hurriedly fetched a glass, she sniffed it suspiciously, lips curling. Ethan paced the lab, sniffing the air as though searching for something unseen. Lily clung to her father but pressed her ear against his chest, listening too intently to his heartbeat. Side effects, Adrian told himself aloud, pacing to the console to check their vitals. Neurological recalibration, sensory misfires. It'll pass. He scanned the readouts, but the data offered no comfort. Their pulses were erratic, brainwave patterns unstable, as if their minds struggled to anchor themselves in the living world. Still, he forced a smile as he turned back to them. "You're adjusting, that's all. Soon you'll feel normal again." Claire's eyes narrowed at him. "Normal?" Her voice was deeper now, weighted with something alien. "You dragged us back." Adrian froze, his mouth dry. I saved you," he stammered, but she stepped closer, her wet hand gripping his wrist with inhuman strength. "We weren't meant to return, Adrian. Do you think the dead forget?" Her nails dug into his skin until he winced. The basement lights flickered, shadows stretching long across the walls. Ethan stopped pacing, head tilting unnaturally, as if listening to a voice no one else could hear. Lily giggled suddenly, but it was not the innocent laughter Adrian remembered. It was hollow, echoing, too old for her years. The man who had conquered death now felt the first prick of terror. His family had come back, yes. But what else had come back with them? The following days blurred into a haze of dread. Adrian tried to re-establish routines, to pretend life was as it once was. He prepared meals, but his family barely touched them. Claire poked at her food with distant disinterest. Ethan pushed his plate away, and Lily merely stared at the meat with curious fascination before whispering, "It's not right." Their refusal to eat gnawed at him. By the third night, Adrian woke to the sound of footsteps and found Ethan in the kitchen, tearing into raw chicken breasts with his bare hands. Blood smeared his chin, and his milky eyes gleamed. "Ethan, stop!" Adrian shouted, pulling him away. But the boy hissed like a cornered animal, his strength far greater than it should have been. It took all Adrian's will to restrain him. Ethan's voice came low, guttural. "I'm starving, Dad. Starving for something different." Adrian's hands shook as he held his son. This wasn't malnutrition and through. It was something deeper, primal. Claire's behavior grew stranger too. She spent hours in front of the mirror, staring not at her reflection, but beyond it, as though she saw something Adrian couldn't. "Do you hear them?" she asked one evening, eyes unfocused. "They're calling us back." Adrian pressed her shoulders, desperation cracking his tone. "You're alive now. I brought you back to stay." Claire only laughed softly, her voice like broken glass. "Alive? Adrian, you've tethered us. Half here, half there. You don't know what you've done." Lily frightened him most of all. She no longer played with dolls or toys. Instead, she wandered the halls at night, whispering to someone unseen. Once, Adrian followed her and froze when he heard her speaking in a voice too deep for a child. "He thinks we belong to him, but we belong elsewhere." When he asked her who she was talking to, she smiled sweetly and said, "The ones who burned." Sleep abandoned Adrian entirely. He buried himself in the lab, rechecking his formulas, the gene splicing, the resurrection algorithms. It had all been perfect on paper, flawless in execution. Yet something vital had slipped beyond his control. The soul, the essence. He muttered to himself, "The cells are theirs, the bodies are theirs. But what came back isn't them." His colleagues had warned him, but he hadn't listened. One night, the truth of their hunger revealed itself. Adrian awoke to the smell of iron, sharp and metallic. He followed the scent into the basement and froze. The family dog, forgotten in his grief, lay lifeless on the tiles, its belly torn open. Ethan crouched over it, feasting. Lily licked her small hands, smeared in red, while Claire watched in silence. When they noticed Adrian, they didn't look ashamed. They looked satisfied. Adrian's heart plummeted. The house that had once been silent with grief now echoed with the sounds of something monstrous. His family feeding on what life they could find. He stumbled backward, horror flooding him. He had brought them back, but not as the people he loved. They were something else entirely. Something that carried death inside them. And now, bound by his mistake, Adrian realized he was trapped in his own home. With them, Adrian barred himself in the study, heart pounding like a trapped animal's. His family's whispers drifted through the halls, unnerving, almost playful. "Daddy?" Lily's sing-song voice floated outside the door, though it was deeper now, touched with an unnatural resonance. "Come out, Daddy. We're so hungry." He pressed his palms to his ears, trying to drown her out, but the walls seemed to pulse with their voices. He had resurrected them, but in doing so, had unleashed something he could no longer control. By morning, he found Claire waiting in the kitchen. Her posture elegant yet unnatural, her eyes hollow pits of frost. She smiled faintly. "Adrian, we don't belong here. You chained us to this world, but it's not ours anymore." Her fingers grazed the knife block as she spoke, almost tenderly. "You must let us go back." Adrian's voice cracked, desperate. "I can fix this. I just need more time. I can make you whole again." But Claire shook her head. "Number, you're clinging to ghosts, and ghosts always drag the living down." Ethan entered, blood still smeared around his mouth from their last meal. He stared at his father, voice shaking with fury. "Why didn't you leave us in peace? Do you know what it feels like to wake up in flesh that doesn't belong to you? To remember fire, screaming, falling, every second of dying?" He slammed his fists onto the table, the wood cracking under his strength. "You made us relive it, over and over." Lily climbed into Adrian's lap then, her tiny hands curling around his face. "Daddy," she whispered, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You should come with us." For a moment, the temptation nearly broke him. He could be with them, beyond the veil. But then he caught the metallic tang of blood still clinging to her breath, and he recoiled in horror. These were not his children anymore. not his wife. They were fragments, shadows wearing familiar faces. He stumbled back to the lab, frantically preparing a sequence to deactivate the serum that kept their body stable. His fingers flew across the console as tears blurred his vision. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I can't let you keep existing like this." But behind him, he heard the slow creak of footsteps. They had followed him. Claire's voice, soft and cold, curled around him like smoke. "Adrian, we don't forgive you." They lunged at once. Ethan's hands gripped his shoulders like iron. Lily's nails dug into his arm, and Claire's breath was hot against his ear. In a final surge of terror and love, Adrian slammed the override button, flooding the pods with sterilizing energy that would cascade through their cloned cells. Screams tore through the basement, guttural and inhuman, shaking the foundations of the house. Adrian wept as their forms convulsed, flickered, and finally dissolved into silence. When it was over, he stood in the ruins of his lab, smoke curling from the consoles, the scent of charred flesh in the air. The house was silent again. Truly silent, forever silent. He had conquered death, but only to learn its cruelest lesson. The dead are meant to stay dead. Alone in the vast empty estate, Adrian sank to his knees, whispering into the void, "Forgive me." But no voice answered. Only the echo of his own madness remained.